Hi, everybody. So Anya and I are here together, and we're going to talk about a lot of different things that I've been talking about, but with a twist so that they can come in with a different perspective from Anya. I think that will really help. So,
Yeah, I'm excited. These are my favorite things to talk about.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring up the pictures and you can start.
Yeah. It's funny when we've been talking just before I have to like get my bearings, like, okay, where were we?
Oh, this is a plate, not a mirror.
Well, it works the same, doesn't it? It's the same.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think what the great place to start is I've been getting asked a lot about the oversoul. Like I think what's coming up at the moment is multidimensional level healing.
Mhm.
So like different layers of healing, and a lot of people are getting really like frustrated with, well, I've already done this before, I've already gone over this before, why is this coming back up? And I think the most important thing to recognize is healing is a continuous journey. It's never going to be something that we get to a destination or a place of. However, there is so many different layers, like the onion, as I say, and it's just going through the deeper layers of that issue, whether it's on a mind, body, soul, cellular level. And then now what's happening is in the soul and spirit kind of world, we're having these Akashic contracts, past lives, parallel lifetimes, all these other different kind of versions of self that
Mhm.
the ancestral trauma is coming over, and it's all really kind of overlapping in terms of, well, we're having to experience now this whole sense of healing the human mind and the body, and being aware of all the things going on in the human life, but then being aware of the higher self and the oversoul and what that actually means. Because first of all, there is a difference, and I think sometimes there is a kind of confusion over if there is a difference or not. And the oversoul, which this kind of image explains a little bit for us, is the representation of something that is whole, so a mirror or a plate, for example, in this image. And when that is broken into all these little fractal of pieces, they still belong to the same origin point of that mirror or that plate. They all belong to the oversoul. They're all connected to the oversoul, but they're all now separate pieces that are now having a separate experience away from the oversoul and away from the higher self. So the higher self is kind of like what I call the middleman in between the oversoul and the human, because that's kind of the communicator, the messenger that we can tap into, that we are directly connected to, that is obviously directed then connected to the oversoul. So the more we are connected with our higher self, and the more we are in tune and recognize the higher self frequency, the more connected we are to then the oversoul, which stores the records, the memories, all the different types of knowledge and experiences that every single fractal of your soul has ever experienced and will experience. It's all stored in that oversoul. So, because obviously time does not exist, so it's not on a concurrent schedule of past, present, future. There is just all this knowledge, wisdom, memories, and information that's stored within this, like an iCloud within the oversoul. And we have then, as a human, from the world we've been brought into in this society, there's been a disconnect from that higher realm and from that higher version of self, which means a lot of the time we didn't know there was ancestral trauma, there was masculine and feminine wounds and shadow work. Like, we didn't have this awareness. Now that's being connected through our higher self, and the higher self is able to pass on the information of, okay, maybe you need to look into kundalini, maybe you need to look into past life. And sometimes that can just come in like a thought or something you see in your human world and kind of get drawn there. It's not necessarily a godlike voice coming in your head, directing you, telling you what you have to do. It's sometimes just guidance and like being nudged in the right direction and being shown different different alternatives that you could use to break the cycles that you're in. So I definitely believe that right now the higher self is trying to communicate through a lot of our human vessels and indicate where in the soul we have levels of healing to do. So whether that's in the past lives, which has come up more so over the past couple of years, but still relevant. And I think sometimes I can recognize quite quickly now when it's past life, because it doesn't feel like my experience.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful, it's a really
So this
beautiful
is
image.
a fractal.
Okay. I love
So
that.
if you look at it, you can see that this beautiful swirl is also repeated along the whole line of
Yep.
the edge. So, and it's just going to repeat over and over and over again. And that's what fractals are. And we're fractals of source, you know, fractals of God. And that oversoul is a bigger fractal because that came out first, right?
Yeah.
And then fractalized into higher selves or souls. So basically everything, and I there's a show coming out that explains this. But I think we need to explain it over and over again because our brain is like trying to grasp it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And it's hard to translate.
It is. It's like there's so much programming that we're small that we don't, you know, we don't comprehend that, oh, guess what? We may be small, but our soul is massive, you know.
Yeah.
And
Truly.
if we think about us in comparison to like a bug,
Yeah,
then we look like a titan.
exactly. And it is about perspective. Like you say, we have been taught to believe that we're not capable of expanding. And not just that, like we've been taught to believe that this small condensed society that we live in is our version of reality. And it is simply held by a construct of fear and a construct of all that we know, you know. And even when I knew for quite a long time, I had a knowing that, you know, we create the world around us, we perceive that, and how we create it in our own experiences. But when I actually physically experienced that via meditation or ceremonial plant medicine, I got to experience the real physical sensation of the world around us actually not being this solid kind of structured walls, tables, buildings, and you know there's vibration and energy and colors that make up this surrounding via our conscious perception. And that can be a really hard concept for people to grasp, that oh, actually everything I see around me might not be tangibly physically real. It might be a construct of my own creation of consciousness with the vibration tonal frequency that it comes with. And that is a real, even though I knew that in information, it wasn't until I experienced it that I really truly knew that, you know, because I don't think you can understand when that's all you ever know and all you've ever seen until you see the alternative. It's quite hard to physically grasp, I think.
It is. It's really hard to physically grasp. But like the 3-letter agency that starts with a C put out, I don't remember how long ago it was, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but it was called the Gateway Process, right? What is that? That's teaching you that you can walk through walls. So, you know, if that is out there and they've been hiding it forever, then why aren't we using it? Like, why aren't we using some of those principles? Because basically they stole it. They stole it and hid it.
And put it in the media and in like certain films and made you believe that, like, you know, because it's so interesting, like things like ghosts and higher dimensional beings, they can walk through walls in films and programs, and they can walk through doors. Like they're not bound by the physical constructs of the 3D world. And as a human, we accept that. We're like, oh well, that's because they're a ghost, but not realizing in our own bodies we have that light body, we have that etheric astral body, we are the same, that is our soul body, our spirit. This is just our human vessel. And obviously it is a difficult one because I still can't walk through walls myself. I mean, I'd like to, but we're not quite there yet. But the point, the understanding's there, the knowledge is there. And I now we're having access to be able to understand these concepts, like being able to use the elements to fly and connect, and all these different things that we've been told are only for superheroes and mythical creatures, which, you know, if you look back in reality and in the textbook and in religious texts, it's all there. The healing hands, walking on water, they've been able to, all these things are now abilities that we're all finding access to. And we don't all now think that everyone's Jesus because they've got healing hands. We all now understand that that's part of being a higher connected consciousness being. And that's exactly what Jesus, in my opinion, perceived was. He was just a higher conscious being in a human body at that time. So we're now being able to see that play out in the real human world on how we are having access to these higher abilities and these like gifts. But it's just about being able to not limit that by going, oh, well, this world is small, constricted, you know, box. It's like ticking the boxes. And that's how they've kept us so small. It's not because we are small, it's because we've been conditioned to believe we're only in this 30-centimeter box, and if we move out of it, we don't exist, when in reality the whole world exists out of there.
Yeah. It's just like if you put a bunch of flying bugs, it doesn't matter what they are, and you put them in a jar and you put a lid on the jar. And after a certain period of time, and I want to say it's like 24 hours, they quit trying to get out of the jar. And then you remove the lid and they stay in the jar.
Yeah.
You know,
that is such a relevant analogy.
And we're basically, our bodies are upgrading. We are becoming more and more filled with light. So we're capable of more and more, only our mind doesn't know that we are.
Yeah, that's simply the thing that limits us, is the belief system, the programs, all the patterns, and like everything we have been installed in our beliefs. You know, as a kid, when, you know, my brother used to pretend he was Spider-Man and literally like jump from wall to wall, and in his mind, my dad used to move him around the walls, and in his mind he genuinely believed he was flying around the walls, you know, and he did have memories of that. And I think it is like allowing ourselves to go back to that inner child that believed it was jumping around the walls, and that believed we could fly, that believed we had wings, that believed we were magic. You know, I watched Matilda and I used to think, yeah, I can do that too. It was a really kind of funny, interesting like perspective to look at, when you see it is only as we get into that adulthood or teenage years where we're told, don't be unrealistic, get in the real world, like, you know, stop living in fairyland and imagination. Whereas really now what we have to do is get back to that, and that knowing that there is unlimited possibilities and so many things that science and other quantifiable subjects can't explain, like the natural thing of why music causes a reaction and a physical bodily reaction in a human being. That's never been explained and probably never will, because it's frequency. And this is what we need, that understanding now. Everything is not just in a box, and we can't just understand it. We have to expand our mind outside that box to truly integrate that knowledge.
Right. And I think the way that they kept people in the box was to make them afraid of death.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's a massive.
So remember that you're immortal. You know, your soul goes on forever. And just try and deprogram the mind. Because everything you see in front of you, you created it.
And
it
can be really painful for the human. Like, I know people that have lost a lot of people over the past couple of years, and I've observed that the people passing, and you know, even as a human that understands a lot of that, and as a spiritual being that understands a lot, it doesn't mean that it's not still a sad experience, and it can be still a sad experience. That you're allowed to have that human experience of grieving and pain, acknowledgement, like that is completely justified. But what it is then about, which I think Anya is referring to, is reprogramming that a long-lasting belief that they've just disappeared, that they're gone, that their life is over, or that you'll never see them again. Like, a lot of these beliefs are what keep us in depression, sadness, and extended levels of traumatizing grief, which is where my dad's been for a long time. And it really is sad to see, and it's so great for him to observe now that maybe the person that he did grieve for the past 20 years is not actually just gone. Maybe they are connected to a whole range of other experiences and lifetimes and memories, and I could see the processing in his brain to think, oh, okay, then this means that a lot of the things you were grieving for are not actually the true reality of what happens after passing. You know, he was grieving because he felt like his time had been taken too soon and there wasn't enough done, and all these reasons why on a human we think, oh, you know, it's wrong, it's not right. However, the soul knows, and once we start to understand that, and the soul has the higher plan and the contracts and the other missions and lifetimes to be doing, we start to understand the bigger picture of why we have had this experience and what we gained from each other. And if we can observe it in that way, I've witnessed a close friend being able to do that, and then she was kind of feeling guilty for not grieving in the same way as everyone else. And I was like, no, because you're grieving in a way that understands, you understand the process of this passing, and you know that she's not just gone, so you can go through it through a healing perspective, and you can understand you'll see them again and they're still with you, and it brings so much peace.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and the original people, they basically have a party and they say, okay, well, I'm going to go. And they just go lay down and then they're gone, you know? And that's kind of how we're going to be doing it in the future, because we're going to choose when we go, but we'll actually know that we're getting ready to go too. The awareness is going to be so much more amazing. I can't remember the name of the movie, but there was a movie, you can look it up, with Mark Wahlberg. So just look that up. And there was this library, and this is how the Akash, you know, first started coming in. This movie's a couple years old.
Yeah.
And there's so much disclosure in it. So I'll try and find it and stick the name of it under this video if I remember. But so basically this whole library was around these people. But these people were so odd, and they said they were schizophrenic, but it was because they remembered their past lives.
Right.
So they had access to all that stuff, and we're gaining access. So I broke a parallel life contract the other day.
Nice.
Yeah. And it was beautiful. And somebody was upset in this lifetime because of the parallel lifetime. And I was like, why is this person upset? Like, I don't understand why they're upset. So I went and I found out why, and I changed what was happening, and it diffused the whole thing. So it really is massive what we're able to do now. But think about all those gifts coming in, like we're in a crystalline body.
Yeah, that's the thing. The human can actually handle now more information, more wisdom, more gifts and skills and abilities from that oversoul, which then contains the past lives, the parallel lives, you know, and we're able to now integrate that into the human more so, and we're able to like translate what it is. Like you say, I always know when now I'm integrating, or I had to do a parallel lifetime. I always go in my sleep, but I woke up with all the remembrance, which I never usually do. So I knew it was something I needed to consciously acknowledge in this lifetime as well. And it's so interesting now the extent of which, instead of it just being like a little tiny glitch and a little bit that I used to get before, it's a very clearer picture. And I do think that's what we are stepping into, like you say, is and I used to worry and think, well, will we lose who we are? Will we lose our own identity? Because, you know, I didn't understand quite fully the concept of what that meant, you know, to integrate other aspects of self, because it does sound quite like you will lose some parts of then yourself. But then what I realized is it's not, it's just expanding bigger and bigger, and still knowing that you are living this human experience as this person in this shell, and that's not going to change. It's just knowing that you've also lived that experience and that one, and you're able to integrate knowledge and wisdom from them lifetimes and bring that in, and understand why you know and recognize certain people and familiar souls that you know in this lifetime, because you'll have them overlapping memories, you know. Really, really, really. It is.
So,
It's
And we used to only get a small portion of our higher being or our
Mhm.
soul into the body.
Yep.
And some people have hit 100% at this point of their higher self or their soul. So,
Integrating.
yeah. And these little dots are the other souls
Mhm.
that come out of the oversoul. That's who you're talking to. You're talking to them. They're your family. They're yourself, it's you.
Yeah, and it is a strange concept for people to understand. I think that we are us in this body in this lifetime, but we are also then a part of something so much bigger than just this one body in this one lifetime. And I hope that brings people some sense of peace and like knowing that everything's not as zoomed in and stressful as we think, like in this just one lifetime. Like this is just part of a fleeting experience that we're having in so many different other ways, and bringing back that knowledge and that wisdom back up to the oversoul. And it's a continuous cycle. And like you say, I do think there is a point in which we'd probably choose after cycles and cycles and cycles, but the whole point is to learn, to expand, to grow, to heal, and to, in this lifetime, awaken and ascend the whole of humanity, which is a big job. And I think that's kind of why we've had that integration, and like it feels like everything's been sped up in this lifetime in a smaller period of time for us to go from not having that to having that. It was quite a big gap in the time that we did do that. And I think now it's like the processing period, so it's not as full on, but it is about us allowing and understanding and translating the experiences that we are going through whilst integrating them aspects.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of the purging that we've been doing. So we've been purging, and a lot of stuff that we have to deal with will come to the surface of our awareness. And sometimes it's something that we need to deal with for our family line, or sometimes it's something to deal with your soul. But as you purge, more and more of your higher self can get into the body because you're making space.
It doesn't feel nice at the time.
It doesn't feel nice, but yeah,
Feels
I look forward to it now.
Well,
Because I'm like, okay, let's purge this out. Let's go in, let's get it done. And then I'm going to have like this great feeling the next day.
I do think that is a really great way to look at it. Like, and I think if you can take that perspective, you should. I'm working on getting to that. I really am. But I think I feel it so intensely that do you know, like when an animal gets ill, like you're saying, you feel like the animal feel like it's going to be ill forever. Like that's how I feel when I'm purging. I feel like it's never going to end. And it's so dramatic. And I'm just like, no, when will it end? So I really don't, I don't enjoy it. But I know I understand that there's a bigger picture, and I get that. That's why I go through it. But yeah, I don't enjoy that ride. I'm not gonna lie, unless it's like small fleeting ones. When it's a whole intensified period, I do struggle, and I think it's a lesson for me to not deal with things on my own as much and connecting with other people of the same thing. So I know even that experience of dealing with it is a lesson in itself. But yeah, I don't mean they're always pleasant and enjoyable.
No, sometimes you can get lost in them. And I think part of it is your emotional type. You know how there's the different emotional types? What are they called? Kinesthetic, which is, I think, yours. Mine is, I can't remember. So digital, kinesthetic, tonal. So I'm tonal.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, and then there's one more, visual.
Yeah, because Trish doesn't feel when she's purging, like she go, because we work very closely together, and she goes through these purges and she'll isolate on her own, but she doesn't feel this intensified emotion and like the wave of it all. Like, and some people don't, and that's the thing. There is no right or wrong way to do these purges and experiences and expansions. There is no kind of guidebook to it, and you can have all this wisdom and all this knowledge and all this connection. Like I class myself as quite connected and quite knowledgeable on what I do, but it doesn't mean that you're exempt from feeling and that you're exempt from experiencing experiencing and learning and growing and having lessons happen from the universe that we don't expect. Like, we're all still a part of that, and that's the beauty of living the human life.
It is. Yeah. And your human vessel is like the most important thing that you're caring for right now, because your soul is upgrading your human vessel, and your human vessel, that human consciousness is what's ascending.
Yeah,
Because your
exactly.
soul has ascended already before.
Yeah, and I think that was a concept people don't fully understand sometimes. That I was, again, explaining to people I know, and I was explaining how in this time of awakening, this is different than usual, because we have the evolution of souls, literally like the age of a human body, if you will, the timing. And it's not necessarily in any way an ego thing to have an older aged soul than another being.
Mm-hmm.
But we have had these experiences where some of us have gone past human incarnations and past this kind of 3-4 dimensional lifetime to 5 and 6 and higher, and then had to come back, so de-evolutionize the soul to help with the awakening process, which is why we have this giant pool and mixture of different aged and different frequency souls, because some of us are there to raise that collective frequency, and we have come from higher frequencies, which means we don't have a sense of belonging, recognition, or resonance with the frequency that a lot of people resonate at in the society. So we don't vibrate with that, and that can really be something you then internalize and think there's something wrong with you, or you have anxiety, or blah, 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 when it's really about observing the fact that this time of awakening is very different to any time that we've gone through before. Mm-hmm. And that's why we have this whole mixture of leveled souls. And everyone does have their own little role, but some maybe have more knowledge and more wisdom because of the age of their soul. And that's not like a competition, that's just a simple kind of fact. And it's just about understanding that we can't expect other souls that are not of an evolutionized level to recognize and do the work that we're doing if they're not at that level of their soul. You wouldn't expect a 2-year-old to do the same labor as a 20-year-old, and that's what we're kind of expecting these people to do, by expecting them to be at the same level of soul awakening as us or others, when they might just not be physically capable to do that, especially not in this lifetime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also think about, everybody's talking about NPCs and all of that. So what if an NPC gets a walk-in that's an old soul?
Interesting.
Then that vessel, that body can ascend. So you never really know what's going on with a person. If they're empty, they're not necessarily permanently empty.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and I didn't think about that, because I know there's a lot of space fillers in terms of the conscious creation around us. There's been a lot of space fillers put there too, overwhelm, distract, lead, the sheeple, whatever, the whole energy is going on. But I do think that sometimes I had a wondering of, and maybe actually even yesterday or the day before, I thought, I wonder why, if there was all NPCs and there's loads of them, why would they have to go through the whole effort of like pregnancy and labor and then this whole like connection to the human world for nothing? Like, why would that just be like a computer glitch just for nothing? Like, it didn't really make sense. So it would make more sense that there would be maybe vessels ready for the awakening and the ascension that maybe wouldn't have made it through the process of the original awakening, originally in the human body, with the trauma as well from the human world.
Yeah. And they're mixed in. I mean, there's some that they're just a hologram. They're not even real, and it's because we've created them in our own mind. And we're like, oh, well, I'm going to go to this town and it's the weekend. It's going to be busy. But I always feel like, okay, if I'm going to go into the store, the people that I make eye contact with and speak to, they're real. The rest are NPC.
Yeah, I see.
Unless they work there and I recognize them. Yeah.
somewhere they walk they walk past and they like like their eyes don't even recognize my existence, and I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, this person really just did. And they just walk in their little, and we had one the other in Spain the other day, and he really looks like a character on a game. He was walking like, and then he just stood there in stationary mode like this for a minute, and I thought, wow, it's really like a game character, just someone in the background just doing the little obsolete life. But sometimes that makes me feel a bit um like, I don't know, like, not ego, but you know, like what if I'm wrong about that? What if these people are their own little people? But then you look at them and really there's no, that connection's not there, that energy, that frequency that you resonate with, or even that you just recognize as a soul. I don't feel that frequency, and I don't feel that connection of energy, and I really find it quite stagnant. So I do think that's when you know there is definitely no action going, no lights on at home.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And it's very weird.
it is strange.
It's
Strange.
strange. Yeah.
It's a strange concept to understand, to think that, because I mean, imagine saying that out loud, like when you actually really think about, oh, these people are not real people. They're just constructs of the social creation around us, and they're not even living a real life. And what happens when you leave that building? Do they just not exist anymore? Do they just go off and live their little NPC lives? Like, that's what I go on with all these little questions and deep questions, and you know, then it's like you'll never know all the answers, but I like to try.
It's almost like as you go into it. So let's say that you're going to go visit somebody you've never met before.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to go to a party. It's like you will attract beings to interact with. But if that, if you drove by that house, it wouldn't be the same. Like, it would just be empty.
That's what I think. So it is like,
Yeah.
multiple dimensional realities concurrently existing at the same time. And because the more awake, connected souls, when they are co-creating reality together or creating their own realities, that's when there is more like conscious connections of beings. So when they meet and there's like multiple experiences where they had a collective co-created reality experience, because that was more consciously connected beings having a co-collected experience. But like you say, when it's just like on your own, or and you kind of just experiencing the societal world around you, and you're manifesting people, or a lot of kind of background energy, it really is quite difficult to wrap your head around that on a tangible level these people, if we want to say, maybe will not exist or do not have this whole experience of life and connection that we do at all, because they're just kind of like a projection, like you say. It's just like actors, like what they call, like the background actors, you know.
Yeah.
And when they went to the pub and they just sat there, but they don't have a part, they don't speak, you never know who they are, and you couldn't probably tell them what they look like, but you notice the perception, the feeling is there. Because imagine if we just walked around and it were completely empty, like when we all got to, you didn't come to the gala, but when we all went to Ireland in just gone April, it was like empty. Like there was no people, there was no NPCs, there was nothing. It was just empty, derelict, and it was such a strange experience to have our created reality, but then have no other, even little people like in the background. It was really strange. So sometimes we want it to be better with or without. Who knows? I think it's part of the human experience right now.
Well, and I think when you're when the parallels are flipping, or we're in the middle of, like, we just had a massive purge collectively, then all of a sudden there will be no population. Like, it's just an empty place because it hasn't reintegrated or repopulated for the collective that is still here.
Yeah.
So I want to show you a consciousness scale, because this illustrates, you know how sometimes you just can't have a conversation?
Oh yeah, 100%.
You know?
Most people believe me, is that's the reality.
I know.
Actually, in my area.
It's crazy. So you have these consciousness, and it goes all the way down to 20, which is shame. Yeah. But you have all of this stuff in here, and jealousy is right in there with fear.
Yeah, well, it is.
I found jealousy to be a big one lately.
Well, it's insecurity, and it's that feeling of not feeling good enough, not
Yeah,
feeling worthy. All these old patterns are coming back up. So all them feelings of lack of worth and good enough, that creates then the jealousy, because it just makes us feel like we're not enough, we're not good enough, so we're going to be jealous, And like I say, it's fear and it's insecurity in self, and that is a
yeah,
real difficult one because it can spiral off in your mind if you let it.
yeah. And it becomes something where people lash out if they're jealous or they do mean things. Same
100%.
with fear, because the brain like disengages. But if you are, let's say that you're in enlightenment, right?
Mhm.
And you try to have a conversation with the fourth dimension,
Yeah.
good luck.
Yeah. It's going to be really difficult.
It just is so hard. Yeah.
And I
So,
think the flip between as well, depending on like what we're dealing with and the choices we make and the energy that we experience and the people we choose to, like you say, try and interact with, can really affect our vibrational frequency. So even those level of consciousness may be up very high, very up in enlightenment, and I am, and in the higher frequencies, we are then maybe still living and choosing to vibrate around frequencies that are not of our natural origin frequency, which then lower our vibration. So it is important to recognize like who we're integrating with and what frequencies
right,
we're emitting.
who are you hanging out with? And that goes for everything in your life. Like if you're hanging out with someone who's screaming all the time or doing, abusing their spouse or doing things like that, like you're lowering your frequency.
100%.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, I would do the best to get to inner light, to get to 400, which is also love.
Yeah.
To get there and just go up the scale. I mean, most
Mm-hmm.
people that are watching this, they're in that inner light. They realize who they are. They may not totally accept it yet at times. Like we bounce back and forth depending on
That's
what's
what I
going
mean.
on.
Like there might be
Yeah.
a time you're up in inner wisdom, and that is like my natural state of being is quite aware, quite like calm and loving and healing. But then there's sometimes where I get angry. I still have a human experience, I still have an emotion, or I get
Yeah.
overwhelmed, or get anxiety, and I have to work through that. And like they are feelings that you're allowed to have, because we're not aiming to become a numb being. We're not aiming to
No.
become emotionally numb. We're aiming to become able to be self-aware, recognizing when we're projecting, when we're being projected on, and recognizing patterns and programs and things that we can work on healing. So that doesn't mean perfection, and that doesn't mean completely neutral, no emotion either way. Like we're still allowed to have opinions and humor and different things that excite us and joys, because we really truly have come here to be human. And
Yeah.
it's about working on the inner level of consciousness, so that you as an inner being are tapping into your level of knowledge and wisdom and connection to self. But that doesn't mean that then in your human you might not fluctuate between different vibrational emotions, because that's not your reflection of consciousness. That's a reflection of your vibrational energy, which are very different things. And I think don't want people to look at a picture and think, oh well, I experience fear and anger, so I'm only stuck down there. That's not the case. Like your consciousness will be at a higher evolutionized level than your human, and then your human chooses to project out because your human's being triggered and like activated in certain ways to release these emotions out, so your consciousness
Right.
can expand higher.
Yeah.
You know?
That's your clue that there's something to do.
Yeah, a
Like if
level.
you're freaking out, that's your clue to
Yeah.
release.
Mm-hmm,
Yep.
mm-hmm.
And we're going to get better and better at that.
Yeah, 100%, because I'm getting better at it. I mean, it
Yeah.
still happens, but I'm getting better at it. But that's the point. Like, I used to really beat myself up for that. And shame, as you've seen, is the worst one you could have. And if then I'm giving myself shit and being in shame for having an emotion, for having a human experience, then that's really going to delay and block my awakening, my ascension, and my healing journey, because I'm going to the lowest possible vibration instead of just recognizing why. So if that happens, if I got upset or angry or emotional or overwhelmed or anxiety, why? What is it showing me? What is it communicating? Just ask that question. Why? What is going on with me? Because that is going to open up doorways and pathways to be able to release that, purge that out, and then level yourself up. So it's all about actually awakening consciousness, and don't try and avoid feeling and get to neutrality, because that's spiritual bypassing. Go through the emotions to break through them so they're not binding you down, and that you can expand and grow consciously so that your level of consciousness is just going to ascend.
Yeah. And that's something that we've been taught to do. So
Yeah.
it's really important that you start to work on your inner self. Like, people have been taught that that's a scary place to go inside. And that's not true. You need
it's not.
Yeah.
The idea of it can be, I can say that. So the thought of it for me was, the thought of going in was so scary. And, I used to wear headphones and avoid like my own thoughts, because the thought of doing it was scarier than it ever actually was doing it. But it is valid to have these fears and thoughts, and all these things are so valid. Like, that's the one thing I think needs to be so emphasized by spiritual guiders and healers and mentors at this time. Like, we're not saying that the intention is to become not a human. We're always going to have these human experiences, and there's always going to be these fluctuations of energy. That's not going to be eradicated. But what it is translating that for yourself, and not expecting and projecting onto other people and expecting them to either fix or heal or translate our own inner wounds for us. Because really, when we're being triggered by someone intensely, it's to recognize a reflection of the inner wounds that we need to work on.
And you don't drop as much as you like.
No.
Yeah, it just so just to go back to that really quick, you just don't drop as much anymore as you start purging. So, like, for me, if I'm in pretty major stress, I'm gonna drop into, maybe anxiety a little bit, which is not on here. But like, I can feel the anxiety in my system. But really, I'm up in here most of the time.
Because then you go back to awareness, and then you go present. So this is the point, it's the cycle. So because as consciousness is at a higher evolutionized level, it's like, well, I can drop into fear, I can drop into anxiety and feel that for that moment, but then my awareness and my presence of self recognizes that that's not the vibration that I now align to and now frequent at. So then it's the conscious choice then in that moment to recognize that thought and that experience is not me. It's a separate thing to me, and it's just a kind of like fleeting emotion, fleeting experience, and it's a choice whether I choose to identify with that and bring that into my being, or whether I choose to let it go and translate and perceive it and observe it from the side.
And we're going to be helping with this so there's two things that we're doing right now. So I do healing with honey, which you learn a lot of skills in there. And it's $9 a month. And Anya is about to do this massive guided meditation that is around $10, I think, to get in. And I'm going to be doing some activations in the background while she's guiding people. And you're going to get your awareness expanded. And you're also going to get whatever is in your highest good as far as programming is going to get released during that event. And we really wanted to offer this so that you guys can have something that is inexpensive. And also, Anya can do her thing, which is amazing. I've seen her do these before in person. And also, she's going to have a little nest egg for the baby that's coming. So it's really a great win-win all around. But we just wanted to bring that up in this show.
And I do think it's gonna, like, for me, the one feedback that I've been getting on as we're preparing for it is it's good. People are excited to be able to do something as well, to be able to participate in the energy work. We will be doing like guided grid work, if you will, or like energetic activations around the grid. We will be doing like activations within yourself. So there's going to be a lot of like realigning and doing the energy work for self and for the collective. So I do think if it is something you are drawn to do, it will be a chance and an opportunity for you to like tap into your own way of doing energy work and your own way of doing that as a collective and for the collective group. So I think it's going to be really, really beautiful. And like Honey said, it's just, it provides like the whole thing, and because it's so reasonable price, it's easily accessible, and it's, you know, we're going to have a recorded version as well. So for those that can't access the time, which is 4 p.m. UK time, 9 a.m. I believe Mountain time, and then obviously in Australia that's not the best time. So if there is anyone that's wanting it from Australia, there is a recorded version you can purchase on a separate ticket on the same link, so that you can have access to that as well. So please don't feel like you have to join if you don't feel drawn to, but it is something that I think it gives people an opportunity now to awaken and activate their own inner energy work, because energy work is something we all can do if we're drawn to do it, and it makes a massive difference doing it.
It's huge. Somebody was asking me, and this was in a comment, about freedom.
Ooh.
How do we learn how to be free? And this is really important, because how do we do that? We free our mind. We free ourselves from all these burdens that we've been carrying around forever. And this is a way to learn how to do that. Anything that you can do to release that stuff and the burden of the genetic line and the burden that the soul has taken on through who knows how many lifetimes, those have to be released. And that's what we're doing. We're letting go of that. And that's popping us up into ascension. That's helping us go forward into ascension. And that's why this process of what's been going on in the world has taken longer.
Yeah.
Because
100%.
people don't know how to be free. Yeah.
And people say they don't even know what freedom is, because if you've never had it, how can you create that? How can you find that? How can you observe what that is? We've been told this is what freedom is, whereas that version of freedom is just like free range eggs, you know. It's not a freedom, it's just a pretended version of, there you go, you get a little bit of grass, so they're outside, it's all great, you know, not realizing there's a whole other world out there to explore and other ways of living. And that's kind of the way I see it. Like, none of us actually know what freedom is in terms of what that means to us, because you have to figure that out, and to figure that out you have to find out who you are. So for me, what freedom looks like for me is completely different for someone else, completely different for you, for my family, for everyone. It's completely different on an integral level of what does freedom look like to me. And to discover that, I have to figure out who I am. And I think that's where every answer resides within self. But we are very based in this awakening process, and we have been very based on truthers and people bringing out information and getting the confirmation from the human world, when in reality, if that same energetic frequency and that dedication and energy was put into figuring out who we are and figuring out our truth and our own frequency, then maybe we wouldn't need that human validation as much as people actually believe.
We would understand that we're worthy.
And we don't
know. So good. And we came in knowing that.
I know, right?
So when you were born, the day you were born, you knew, I'm worthy, I'm loved, everybody should love me, I'm so, you know, awesome and special, and ta-da, here I am. And then somebody spanked your bottom.
Yeah.
So there really has been endless programming, and we're breaking out of that now. So I feel like we have given people so much information in this video. make sure if you want to go to the meditation that you look for the link below. But you may want to watch this twice, honestly. That just occurred to me because it's a very dense conversation, but it's so good. Like there's so much in there that you can get out of it. So
yeah, and if you really did want to unpick, if you are like me, because I like to unpick and unravel everything and find out why, you know, you can look at, I think, going into things and asking yourself the questions, and then like really reflecting on how what we say resonates with you, because at the end of the day we all interpret things slightly differently and we all have our own translation. And this is what I'm trying to get out to people now, like what I understand now, and I never ever thought I would say this, but I understand quantum physics and science, and I did barely pass science. I barely even got a C. So it's quite interesting to realize why I now understand that, because I translate it in my own way, but it overlaps. And it's the same thing with some religions and some different philosophical beliefs and scientific beliefs. Like the fundamental core values are there, and it's about finding out, okay, how does this translate to us? And what does this mean to us? Obviously, if you're here, it would be probably more like the way we translate it, but just be aware that people around you that they might get more than you think. They might just translate it in a way that you don't resonate with.
Yeah. They might mean exactly the same thing. And a lot of people do. You just don't understand their language.
Yeah, simply that. It's like they're speaking a different language because it's not the same words, but the frequency and the information and the resonance of what we are both saying, it usually does match up. There is only like certain exceptions, I'd say, with things like religion, where there's fear and indoctrination that's being put upon true core fundamental values, and then it's being kind of like fluffed around with lots of fear and suppression and indoctrination around that. So the core values are true, but then what's kind of around it is not. So that's kind of the only difference, I think. But there is definitely an overlap in many different ways of translating, and I think it's about us observing and not having everybody to translate it in the same way we do.
Exactly. Just, be tolerant.
Yes.
Yeah.
And understand that it's everyone is part of the puzzle piece. They've got their own piece. So by trying to make them like you or understand it your way, you may be taking them away from their own path. You may be taking them off their own soul path. So we can guide and give support as much as we can. But I think really, in essence, we have to just do what feels right to the heart, drop a few seeds of light and awakening, and plant support, but really let people figure out what it means to them in their own way.
Yep, exactly. Because we're all a piece of this plate.
Exactly. We're all part of the oversoul. And we all will all have our own connection to source. So there can't be someone that's more like, oh, this person's connected and I'm not. We're all from source. We're all a part of an oversoul. We're all coming from that. So there can't be, unless obviously, like we said earlier, NPCs, but that's a different story. But the ones that are consciously awake, we have this connection to source. So nobody's not connected. It's just translating your own connection and learning how to tune in, observe and translate your connection to your higher self, to your guides, spirit world, ETs, whatever it is you choose to communicate with. And figuring out that connection from the oversoul, from source, and from your higher self. Like it's already there. We just have to kind of like get the walkie-talkie on the right channel.
Exactly. Yeah. And even someone who's not awake, that lives in your house or that you talk to every day, just because they're not awake doesn't mean that they are not part of the oneness.
Exactly.
Yeah. And maybe they're just not awake in the way you want them to be.
Which is the expectation of others. I have a friend that really could not talk about awakening for a long time. And I always used to try a little bit, and then I stopped. And then all of a sudden recently, they've gone so into awakening, so dived in, so deep. And it's really clear that actually they have been doing subconscious work this whole time. And if I'd have tried to activate their consciousness earlier, like that wouldn't have been in alignment to where they were going. Their timing now to wake up at this moment, at this time, to kind of do all these things they're clearly ready for it because they've been doing the subconscious work that's prepared them to do that. So just know you don't know what's going on behind the scenes in someone's mind and someone's consciousness, and what they're doing in the astral realm, what they're doing while they sleep. Like, we're not aware of that. So just be aware that as much as we're trying to help the ascension move forward, which is all great, focus in your own lane, focus on your own shit, basically, and move forward yourself. And that should help speed up the awakening more than anything. Instead of constantly asking, when's this happening, putting it on other people, we're literally giving us power and as energy to all these other people and expecting these things to save us again. Going back to the old matrix, it has to be a rising of standing in your truth and your power, and you can't do that unless you really feel like you can stand in your truth and your power.
Yep. Because we are making it happen.
Because we are the gods of our own creation.
Yeah. Okay. I love this. This was great. Thank you so much, Anya. And we hope to see you guys all soon.
I know, and I've got a big old belly right now. It's messy.
That's good.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.